Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to NLTI. I'm Mansi and I will be your guide and your mentor for this live session. All right, just a little bit about myself. I am a graduate and a postgraduate from NLU Shimla. Currently, I have been mentoring CLAT students from quite some while. I teach legal studies to class 11th and 12th as well. So I have my fair share of experience in guiding and mentoring students. So today's session is about how you should actually start preparing for your preparation while you're just in class 11th. Now, this is one very valid question that I get asked a lot, right? And a lot of students, a lot of law aspirants who are starting out with their preparation and they're just in class 11th, they have this really common question, right? How do we actually start preparing? What should we do in class 11 so that it's not overwhelming for us? Also, how they are actually at par with the other people who are preparing for the exam, how it they should be dealing with their school life, how they should balance it with the boards that is going to happen in the class 12th, right? So that is all of that is something which we are going to touch upon in this session, right? And if you'll have any questions during this live session, please use the chat box extensively. I will be taking up all your questions, all your queries, and I'll be answering all of them as and when I can. All right, now before we understand your entire game plan that you have to adopt for your while you are in class 11th and you're preparing for CLAT, one thing that I want you to know is that you will hear a lot of times these sentences throughout your preparation journey, that CLAT needs 6 to 7 hours of daily study. Right? You might have heard it from your seniors, from your coaching mentors, from your teachers. A lot of people would have actually told this to you that, if you really want to crack CLAT, then you need to study for at least 6 to 7 hours every day. Then you might have this myth that only your school toppers can crack CLAT. And also something really important, that you need coaching immediately if you really want to start preparing, if you really want to crack CLAT. So in your class 11th only, right, a lot of times we start taking coaching and mentorships and all of that from our class 11th only. So this is something which you might have heard a lot of times, and you are going to hear it a lot in the coming in your entire preparation stage. But how true it is and how valid these questions are, this is also something which we are going to touch upon. Now, I so let's get started with this, right? So I will not exaggerate it a lot. Of course, CLAT has its own fair share of challenges. It's not a cakewalk. I will not say that it's the easiest exam in the country. No, it's not so. It is a little complex. It needs a lot of hard work. It needs a lot of consistency, and it needs a lot of discipline as well, right? But 6 to 7 hours every day while you are in class 11th, is it something which is required? Probably not. Class 11th is much more about the foundation of your CLAT preparation, and you do not have to do it quite rigorously. So 6 to 7 hours of rigorous studying, preparation, mocks, all of it probably is not required in your day-to-day life, right? Of course, in your class 11th, you have completed your 10th boards, right? You've chosen a specific stream that you want to pursue. And class 11th anyway, in terms of education and syllabi, it's quite different from your class 10th and all that school education that you have completed so far. So a lot of times school students, they find it really difficult to balance the change that has happened in the class 11 syllabi along with the CLAT preparation, especially if you're a science student, right? You will witness a huge shift in the complexity of your class 11 syllabi, comparing it to your class 9th and class 10th. So it's little technical. And if you want to balance your class 11th education with your CLAT preparation, in that case, it'll be very difficult for you to, even um, you cannot devote those 6 to 7 hours for CLAT. So in that case, of course, one, you do not have that sort of time with you to devote. Secondly, it is not even required. No matter how much people tell you that you have to study for 6 hours, 7 hours while you're in class 11th and you have to do it every day, no, it is not required. Okay, what is required, that's also something which we'll be discussing in shortly, right? But 6 to 7 hours, no, right? So ease up over there. Secondly, second myth is that only toppers they crack CLAT. That is also not true. I know so many law students, I'm so many law aspirants, so many CLAT rankers who were moderate and average in their school. It were, you know, they were not school toppers, they were mediocre students, average students scoring 70-75% marks, right? Even in the boards they had scored around 65 to 75% marks, yet they were able to crack CLAT, get ranks under 100 also. Like that has also something which I've seen. So it does not matter if you're doing exceptionally well in your school exams, right? It does not, CLAT does not need you to be a brilliant student or a genius student. It tests you in a very different, on a very different criteria, on very different parameters. So your school education, yeah, it's great for your boards, it's great for your mark sheets, but for CLAT, that does not define exactly if you are going to succeed or not, if you're going to crack the exam or not. And then needing coaching immediately. See, one thing that I strongly believe, right, is that coaching is not just giving you a framework for preparation. It is more about you being consistent in your preparation, right? It actually helps you to develop that consistency and discipline. That is what the primary agenda behind coaching is. Yes, of course, you get the study material, you get the guidance, you get the mentorship, you practice mocks, a lot of things that happen in the coaching center. Yeah, that is there. But most important is that you actually build a consistency. You are always there being supervised by someone who's an expert in that area. And whenever you have some sort of problem, you can actually reach out to someone and get your doubts clarified. Otherwise, if even if you are not taking any coaching, it does not mean that you cannot crack the exam. Yes, early, in a very early preparation stage only, coaching is going to help you to build the momentum and the discipline and the consistency that is required. But it is not, it's not that you, if you're not taking coaching for clarity, you cannot crack the exam. That's not true. Yeah, just for the sake of building discipline, you can take coaching, right? But otherwise, it does not mean that you have to take it. So now what exactly CLAT is testing? CLAT does not check how well informed you are. See, whenever you will be appearing for the CLAT exam, you must have completed your class 12th and you're just, completed your entire school. So in that case, if CLAT exam or the consortium, if they expect you to know all the laws that otherwise a fifth year law student will know, that's something which is illogical, that's very irrational, and that is not what consortium actually tests in the exam. They do not want to check how well you remember the law. They do not want to check how well you have memorized everything. No, that's not the case, right? So if you've mugged up everything about GK, everything about laws, right, all that information that has come your way, if you have just crammed it and you think it is going to help you to crack the exam, no, that is not the case. So I see a lot of class 11 students also, right? They get the subscription of this for, a lot of competitive exam magazines, right? GK columns that they come across, and they try to remember all these things. So now if you're in class 11th, it's practically impossible for you to retain in your mind GK and current affairs of 2 years, something which you are reading every day, right? You cannot retain all of it in your mind. So even if you're cramming everything, right, it is not going to stay with you till the exam. So it is not going to work, honestly. Also, learning complex legal terminologies, like I mentioned, it's not the test of your knowledge, right? Of course, you need to know the basics. It's if you're familiar with the subject, if you're familiar with the concepts, it's going to be easier that way. Otherwise, if you do not understand the complex terminology, or if you do not remember what res ipsa loquitur means, it's fine, right? That's not what CLAT is going to test. Then Like I've already mentioned, you do not have to be a brilliant student. It does not, CLAT is not an exam just for geniuses. No, that's not true. I've seen a lot of average students doing exceptionally well in the exam and doing exceptionally well in the NLUs also, in their law schools also, and you know, coming out to be great lawyers and great advocates. And you do not have to memorize everything. That is not what CLAT is looking for. What exactly CLAT looks for? That you, if you can read fast and smart, if you know the CLAT pattern, you will see that the entire exam is comprehension based. There are passages that are given, you have to read the passages, and based on the passages there are going to be 5 to 6 questions, right? So how well you can read the passage, how quickly you can read the passage, and not just reading it, how well you can actually understand it, how well you can interpret it. That's something which CLAT actually tries to test. And how smartly you can answer the questions based on that passage. If there is something which has been mentioned in the passage, let's say it's a legal reasoning passage, how well you can apply the legal principles that has been shared, right? That is something which CLAT actually tries to test. And how well you can understand the arguments that are there, how well you can apply them logically, how well you can work under pressure. It's a really hectic exam. You have 120 questions to be solved in 120 minutes, right? And you have 5 sections. All the sections, they need, different sort of time is required for them, and they need their own time and attention. So how well you can actually do those or solve those questions is something which CLAT really tries to test. And if you can make inform and you can make logical decisions within limited time, that is something which it is actually going to test. So even if you have great memory, you can cram everything out, it is not going to work well if you're not understanding the concepts properly, if you're not applying them properly, and if you're not thinking logically, right? So this is why CLAT actually wants to test this, is also something which we have to understand. See, eventually it is a law admission test, right? They want you to become lawyers eventually. Whenever you will, you know um, complete your law school journey, you will become a lawyer. So as a lawyer, you need to think more proper, you have to be more rational and logical with your thinking. You need to know how to write well, you need to know how to read well, and you need to derive logical conclusion out of situations, and you have to apply the law properly. That is what CLAT also tries to test through this examination. So if you understand the intention of the exam, it's automatically going to be much easier for you to prepare. So it is very, very important that right at the beginning of your preparation only, you should be sure, you should be well aware of what exactly this exam is trying to test. So the exam wants to test how well you can think, how well you can understand, how well you can apply, right? And if you understand this intention of the consortium and then start preparing, automatically the entire preparation journey will be really seamless for you. It doesn't matter how vast the syllabi is. Okay. Now, moving ahead. Okay. What are, okay, like I've already mentioned, the key skills that CLAT really wants to test is not how well do you understand constitution or contract law, how well do you remember, GK facts. That's not something which is actually required. What is required? How well you can read something that is there. See, usually the passages that you get in CLAT is around 350 to 400 words long, which is going to take around 3 to 4 minutes for you to read if you really want to read it carefully. And those 3 to 4 minutes, after those 3 to 4 minutes, you also will need some time to read your questions and solve them. So, how well and how quickly you can read those 300 to 400 words, right? That is something tested. So speed reading is a skill that is required in that case. Then how well you understand what is there, not just reading it. If someone asks you a question based on what all you have read, if you're not able to answer it, it means that you have not understood what all was there. So how well you understand it is also something really important. And how well you connect the ideas or the principles that were given in the passage to the questions that were there, and how well you can apply them is something that is really tested. How well you can solve situations. Now, for example, in legal reasoning, most of the time the questions that you get around are application based questions. Now, what does that mean? In the passage, you will see that there is a law that has been explained. Now, in the question, a situation is given mostly, right? And now you have to apply the legal principle to the situation and predict what can be the viable solution. So, now how well you can actually solve the problem is something which this section or which CLAT actually wants to test. So, in that case, if you do not remember what section 10 of Indian Contract Act says, it's okay, right? But if you actually understand how consideration as a concept works in Indian Contract Act and how it is applied, that is something which is going to be important for you to uh, take care of. So, class 11th is not about memorizing everything, it's about building those skills, your reading skills, your comprehension understanding skills, your reasoning skills, right? And applying and solving real problems. That is something which has to be developed. So, class 11th, you should not overwhelm yourself with a lot of information that is coming your way, but rather work on developing these skills. And trust me, it is going to be a game changer for your entire preparation, for your entire exam result. Now, what are the 5 sections that are there in your CLAT exam, and what is being tested in each section? So we have English, right? In English, they are not actually testing how well if you can read or write like Shakespeare, if you have vocabulary of Shashi Tharoor. No, that's not what is tested. What is actually tested? It is what is tested that how well you can read, right? How well you can understand whatever has been there. So if you can understand the objective of the passage, if you can understand the tonality of the paper, what was the intention of the author in the passage, what sort of arguments have been made, right? If you can identify that in your passage, this is something which your English section actually tests, right? Then the legal reasoning section, if you can think like a problem solver, like I've already mentioned, you'll get questions where the principles will be there in the passage, right? The law will be explained to you. Most of the times the law is explained to you, and then you have to apply those principles to some hypothetical situations, and then you have to find a solution for the same. Logical reasoning, how well you can spot the logic, right? You How well you can derive conclusions, if you can identify the correct or incorrect arguments, right? If you can think critically about the information that has been given to you. So again, it is not that how if you are able to memorize something, or it's much more about if you are able to identify the arguments properly or not. In your logical reasoning section only, right? Sometimes you will get questions which are which is related to analytical reasoning, where you probably will be given some situations or some problems, and then you have to solve them. For example, if there are questions around puzzles or blood relationships or sitting arrangements, that sort of questions are also around that is also something which has been tested, which might take you some time. So, if you have a habit of practicing those questions, automatically it'll be easier for you to solve those questions also. So, one more takeaway from this is that, especially for your questions which are based on these problems like puzzles and blood relations and sitting arrangement and a lot of those logs, for example, right from your class 11th, you just should get a little familiar with this aspect of logical reasoning as well, right? And you can master them in your class 12th, but getting familiar or just getting acquainted with these concepts is going to help you in your overall preparation, and you can save a lot of time in your actual exam if you know what these concepts are, how you can actually perform well, how do you solve them quickly, if there are any shortcuts. All of this is going to help you that way. And GK, see, GK, what we have observed in CLAT so far is that for static GK, there is no limit, right? You can get questions from history as well, from geography as well. Global relations also can be tested. For current affairs, usually what all has happened in the past 1 year is of high significance. So, in that case, while being in class 11th, if you start preparing, or if you just start mugging up all your current affairs, it's not going to stay with you, or you cannot retain it in your mind till the end of the session, till the end of your preparation journey, right? So in that case, yes, you should be familiar with the static GK. So class 11th should be more focused towards understanding the basics that can be tested, the basics of static GK. And in class 12th, you should focus more on current affairs plus practicing your static GK and current affairs altogether, right? So otherwise, it is, if you'll just, stress yourself out, or you just overwhelm yourself with a lot of information, it's not going to be very useful. Trust me, till your class 12th, you will be burnt out. You will be burnt out and you will not have a will to study anymore. All these GK and current affairs will not interest you anymore, right? So do not overload yourself with information, especially when it comes to GK and current affairs. Read it in a way that you are just, you're not reading it, or you're not understanding it, or you're not learning it for an exam, just to enhance your information, just to enhance your knowledge about a certain aspect, certain subject. You can just, start with your GK portion. One more very important thing is that, like I said, you're not supposed to overload yourself with information, right? What exactly is required, that you just are familiar with few incidents or the static GK. Otherwise, for the same, um, what you can actually do is something which is really effective, is that you start reading newspapers. It's as simple as that, right? GK does not need a lot of extra effort. If you are just consistently reading newspapers every day, you develop a reading habit which is going to stay with you for the rest of your life and is going to be extremely fruitful for you for your legal career. Also, you will be familiar with what all is happening around you. It's going to help you in your static GK also and in your current affairs also. So not a lot is required. If you're just reading newspaper every day in your class 11th, it's a really, really healthy habit for your mind, and a great way to start preparing for your GK and current affairs section, right? And lastly, quantitative techniques. See, how quickly you can solve these mathematical problems is something which is tested in this area. If you are someone who has read, who is pursuing maths in your class 11th or 12th, it's going to be comparatively easier for you, right? But let's say you're not someone who's great at maths. In that case, again, if you're just familiar, or if you've just kept yourself a little in touch with mathematics, and I'm not talking about you solving 50, 60 problems every day, no, that's not required. Even if you're just, touching upon one aspect in a week, right? Let's say you're solving 10 questions in a week also, that's also fine. Because you will be in touch with all these concepts in class 12th, you will not be overwhelmed because you will be little familiar with all these concepts, right? Okay, yeah, now I get this question asked a lot that, ma'am, I have a cousin who's in class 9, who's in class 10th, and he has already started preparing for CLAT. I'm already in class 11th. Am I too late? No, you're not too late. In fact, you're absolutely on time. I will not say that you're early, right? But you're definitely on time. You're definitely not late. This is the time where you work on your foundational skills and you work on the foundation properly. See, if you really want to build a strong building, right, you will have a strong foundation first. So if you really work on a strong foundation, automatically it'll be easier for you to make a good, durable building. Same way, class 11th is the time where you work more on the foundational skills. Once you've aced those foundational skills, your reading, understanding, logical application, right, logical reasoning, reducing arguments, all of it, if you ace these skills, developing a reading habit, most important, speed reading, right? If you ace those skills, automatically the entire preparation journey will be much easier for you, and it's going to be much fruitful for you as well. So this is not, class 11th is not the time where you have to solve mocks every week. No, that is not something which we're looking for. right? And also, you do not need to study for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours in a day. No, that's not required. And you do not have to panic, and do not compare your preparation with someone else's preparation. Okay, it's going to be different for you and it's going to be different for others. So it's not necessary that if you are if there is a friend who's preparing, who's doing really well in their mocks, it does not mean that you are lacking behind somewhere, right? Their success is not your failure. So do not compare yourself with them. And like I mentioned, you do not have to waste a lot of your time and a lot of your energy in these in preparing for CLAT initially. You just have to be in touch with the subjects. You have to be just familiar with what all is happening. Enjoy your school life, because once it's gone, you'll definitely be missing it, right? So enjoy your school life and work around it. And what do you actually have to work on is, like I mentioned, developing your reading habits and understanding how CLAT actually works, understanding how can you think faster, keep in touch, stay in touch with law and current affairs, and just keep on working on growing and developing your skills, right? All the additional information you can take, further in your entire preparation, you can do that. So what exactly do you have to do? We'll keep it simple, but we'll keep it effective, right? One thing is that you have to be really disciplined. A routine that is not too hectic, not too consuming, but still has to be followed every day, even if you're in class 11th, and it has to be followed till the time you give the exam. What it is, you have to spend 30 to 40 minutes for reading every day. Now, reading can include anything. It can include newspapers, any articles, any quality content, any content that is relevant to your preparation. If you're reading some random information that is coming your way, some comics that you're reading, that's not something which is going to stay with you. So, read information which is actually logical, which is actually related to your preparation, and give at least 15 to 20 minutes to static GK and current affairs of what all is happening. See, anyway, newspapers are going to help you for the same, but still, take some time out every day just get information about some new facts, some new static information that you can include in your preparation, right? So this way, what is required? 1 to 1.5 hours in a day is required initially, right? So that you have developed the skills. And what you can do is that weekly, every week, you can practice 1 to 2 sectional tests. Now, that means that you can, start with you can just start with one particular section and you can solve 5 to 7 or 10 questions at max. And initially you can just start with one section or two sections, and gradually you can increase your studying hours, also your reading time also, and you can also gradually increase the number of sections that you are taking weekly tests of every week. And do not just take those tests, also review those tests. Right now, once you have completed the test, see what is the solution, what are the solutions right now, where did you go wrong, what sort of sections are challenging for you, so that you have identified your weaknesses really early in your preparation stage, right? And then, okay, now a very realistic plan that I've seen that will or that can work really well for you is that from Monday to Friday you should devote more time upon reading, right? And upon learning, in which you can give specific time. You should devote time for every section and try to get familiar with really, basic micro concepts, so that you are in touch with the syllabi. And on weekends, you should revise what all you have read in the entire week, and you should give sectional tests, 1 or 2 sectional tests in the beginning. Gradually, you can increase the number of sectional tests as well, right? And then you should definitely give 30 to 40 minutes in the weekend to understand and analyze your mistakes, learn from them, if possible, make a mistake log, right? So that you understand which area specifically is challenging for you. Is it a specific section or maybe a specific subject under a specific section, right? So that is something which you can take a note of. And like I've mentioned already, this has to be done consistently. Discipline is the key in this case, right? If you are spending, let's say, 3 months where you are reading or you're studying for 12 hours or 14 hours in a day, it's not going to be as fruitful as if you spend, let's say, 1 hour, 2 hours every day for 2 years, right? But what is important? Discipline and consistency. If you are following a routine, which, like I mentioned, is not very hectic, right? What is required if your career, if your professional goals, they expect 1.5 hours every day from you, I don't think it's too much for you to devote. It's not too much for you to commit, but this has to be done with discipline and consistently. So like I mentioned, the first 6 to 8 months of your class 11th should be about you developing these skills and building discipline and building a routine and following it consistently. Once you have developed it properly, you have made a habit of reading every day, solving some sectionals every week, automatically you will be much in touch with the syllabi, and it's going to be easier for you to scale up from there, right? Because you've just started out. So that is something which definitely is going to help. Now, few mistakes that I have seen a lot of law students or law aspirants performing is that they starts with the mocks too early. That they start solving full length mocks too early, and solving them is one issue. The problem arises when they also start comparing their results and they start getting disheartening with the by the results that they get to see. See, if you have just started your preparation, of course you cannot score 100 or 90-95 marks out of 120 in the first go. It's going to be low. And even if you score those 90-95 marks in the first mock, it does not mean that the score is going to be the same till the last mock. It's going to change, right? So in that case, if you'll attach yourself to the results too much, you will be disappointed. And that disappointment is going to affect your overall performance, not just in the CLAT exam, but also in your school exams or other things that you do in your life. So do not jump into taking long mocks or full length mocks too early. Even if you're doing so, do not get attached to the results. You can, of course, start doing the mocks, taking up the mocks, just to build the habit or get yourself acquainted with the pattern of the exam, but do not get too attached to the results. If you're solving mocks and if you have identified the problems and the issues that are there, if you have a mentor, if you have any guide, if you're taking coaching, your teacher is there, you can discuss your problems or your issues or the performance that you have in a mock with your guides and your mentors. But like I mentioned, do not get too attached to the results, right? It's not going to help you. Memorizing the entire GK PDF. See, I think I've said it enough. It is practically impossible for your memory to retain everything for 2 years, right? So no matter how much you have read it, how much you have crammed it, ultimately you will still have to revise everything by the end, right? So do not waste time in memorizing everything. Yes, read everything, try and understand everything, make yourself familiar with the same, right? But you do not have to cram it, you do not have to memorize it, and not developing reading habits. CLAT is based a lot on your reading abilities. Your CLAT performance is actually based a lot on your reading abilities. So if you can read well, you can definitely score much higher. So if you do not develop this habit, which usually students of class 11th and 12th do not have, especially class 11th, why? Because we are this generation of short content, right? We do not have that attention span. We lose our attention really soon, really quick, and it's difficult for us to focus. So in that case, reading is one such thing which we find, especially this generation finds really difficult because it needs a lot of attention and focus. But this is exactly what CLAT is testing. So how can you ignore it? You just cannot. So do not even try to, and do not even think of skipping this. But like I've mentioned, the sooner you ace the skill, the better it will be for you. Develop those reading habits. Trust me, you will thank yourself by the end of the preparation. And studying everything every day, that's not required. You can just uh, focus on one subject on in a day, one subject or one topic in a day, and go slow, go gradually with the same. That will be fine. And do not compare your journey with someone else. No. Okay, everybody has a different mind, everybody has a different approach towards the exam. Something that worked for you might not work for them, something that worked for them might not work for you, right? So do not compare yourself with others, do not compare yourself to your seniors or your peers. Do what is required, and trust me, you will achieve all that is there for you. Okay, do not panic and just be consistent. Okay, so yeah, I think I've already explained this, but I'll just quickly tell you what can be the game plan for you for your entire preparation journey. So we have divided your entire preparation journey in three stages: your class 11 stage, class 12 stage, and the last 3 months of your examination. So class 11th is where you are actually required to develop the reading habits, right? Like I've mentioned, because that is something which is going to be stay there for you and change your entire preparation journey. And you should just focus on understanding the basics of all the topics that are there, be it law, be it logical reasoning, be it GK. You should be familiar just with the basics, right? And you should be aware with how what exactly each section is testing. And do not take a lot of pressure, do not take a lot of, just do not overwhelm or overload yourself with information, otherwise you will be burnt out till your class 12th. Now, in your class 12th, you have to gradually increase the pace and intensity of your syllabi. Also, your practice tests and mock tests, the number of the same should increase, right? So, why? Because now you're not just working on the basics, you also have to get the advanced information, and you also have to work on your speed. You have to work on your accuracy, on your reading speed, problem solving speed. So you have to take more full length mocks as well. And in the last 3 months, this is the time where you do not read anything new, right? You just work on solving as many mocks, as many sectionals as possible. And you should work more on solving questions quickly, reading properly, reading quickly, and improving overall accuracy. And all throughout that phase, you also have to make a mistake log, and you have to keep a track of your mistakes, and you have to review all your mocks. You have to also review your performance of all the mocks, right? So class 12th and last 3 months are going to be more rigorous, are going to be more demanding, but comparatively, class 11th is going to be much chiller in that way, right? So keep yourself that, just do not overwhelm yourself, and be easy on yourself during that time, and think better, right? Just keep this thing in mind that CLAT is not going to check your memory, but it definitely will check how well you can think. You can only think well if you are well informed, right? So focus more on getting your basics clear, reading as much as you can, developing a reading habit, so that automatically your brain can think better. It can give logical arguments, it can derive logical conclusions, because like I said, this is something which is going to stay with you for the rest of your preparation. So, by the end of this session, make a small promise to yourself that you will start developing at least one habit from tomorrow. It can be just committing to read for at least 30 minutes in a day. But when it comes to reading, it means quality reading, something which is directly related to your syllabus, something which is directly related to your preparation journey. Or you can also start dedicating time 15 to 30 minutes to understand the current affairs and static GK and just, staying informed. Or you can choose one section and you can solve questions, 10 to 15 or 20 questions of that one section every week. Start small, right? Because what is important at this point, what is important is that you at least start, right? And you can start small. That's absolutely fine. And gradually you can increase your pace. You can gradually increase the volume of reading also and volume of questions that you are solving also. But what is important that you develop that one habit and start working on it. It's early, it's January right now, right? It is the absolutely right time for you to start working on it. If you are in class 11th, you will be giving this exam in 2027, right? CLAT 2028, which is going to happen in December 2027, right? You'll be aiming for that exam. So you have those 2 years with you, and only 15 days of January have passed. So even if you start from tomorrow, you still can ace it, right? So think about it and decide for yourself which one habit do you want to develop and start working on it from tomorrow onwards. So, final key takeaway from this session should be that you have to start. And it does not mean that you have to start big, but you have to start early, and you have to start small. And gradually you can increase your preparation and the things that you are reading or the complexity of the questions. Gradually it can grow and it could improve, but you just have to start. And read as much as you can. Trust me, it is going to be your biggest weapon in your entire journey. It's going to be the game changer for your exam preparation. And think like a lawyer whenever you're reading anything. All right, think like a problem solver. Think like someone who understands things properly, who gives reason behind everything. So if you see something that is going wrong, think like a lawyer that what should be done in this case? What would the law do? Use your common sense much more, right? So this is something which is going to help you throughout your preparation journey. Be easy on yourself, but just start and you can improve later. All right, so that is something which I had to share with you. If you have any questions in what all we have discussed, please shoot your questions in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to answer. If you do not have any questions, then I'll take your leave. We'll wrap this session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We'll meet again for more such lives. And yeah, have a great weekend ahead, everyone.